Hello and welcome to another Question Time live here on the Hoeg Law YouTube channel, Virtual Legality. If you haven't been here before, this is a series that is really sponsored entirely by our patrons since we started our Patreon early this year. Generally speaking, during the first couple of minutes of an episode like this, I give people a few minutes to get together, get gathered, and also for somebody in the chat to let me know that the microphone is working, that the stream is working, that you can hear me, because I love talking, and certainly I have talked a lot on this channel, but what you don't know is sometimes the mic doesn't work, sometimes the connections don't work, including if you were following Epic versus Apple. One thing that you don't know is that I taped an entire over hour-long episode, got to the recording, and realized that for whatever reason, the default state in my sound system had not kept track of the actual sound, the actual voice that I was putting on the episode. And so I had to go back and redid it. And I did it immediately after. So at least one of those episodes, I'll have to remember which one it was, actually took me like 2.5 hours of just recording time to get out to you all. And that was a frustrating experience. Oh, and good. Everybody can hear me. That's fantastic. And so, yes, this is Question Time. This is, as I said, sponsored by our Patreon. If you're at all interested in supporting us on the Patreon, go check it out. It's at patreon.com/HoegLaw, or it might be /virtuallegality. You can see I really remember all of the addresses here on a Saturday morning, but please do check it out. One of the things that it helps support is having a fun stream where we talk about what we went over the month, what you're playing, what you're watching, what I'm playing, what I'm watching, and really anything that folks want to ask a question about. Now, in general, this is set up so that patrons of a certain level, I think it's $10 a month, can ask questions, and I will hit their questions first, and we'll go over those. And you've seen a couple of those in previous episodes of this, but very often, folks at that tier and above don't submit questions, just want to participate here as on the Question Time in general, or don't have any specific questions asked. When that happens, we're still going to do an hour-long episode, but everybody that's in chat now can ask questions, whatever you're interested in. And if you're not interested in anything, then you'll just hear me talk about whatever for a period of time. And if we end early, we end early. But that's really what this is all about. Also on the Patreon, we've had sponsors. I'm very, very thankful to everybody that's helped support the Patreon. I'm very excited to say we have more than 50 patrons supporting the channel at this point, and that means a lot to me, honestly. This is a lot of work. May 2021 was an insane amount of work to get all those Epic versus Apples done. A number of commenters had asked me how long those take. You know, it depends on what the subject matter of one of those episodes is, but certainly when Epic versus Apple was happening, and I would wake up very early to look at what the live threads had shown and to correlate that amongst a number of different tweeters, I guess it might be, people that use Twitter. I don't know what that actual name is. That would take me 4.5, maybe even 5 hours to get the research ready, to get what I wanted to say ready, to organize that for you all, to tape, to upload, to get it up onto YouTube. And so because I thought it was important, I thought it was useful to everybody, we did that every day throughout the trial. I think it was ultimately 16, 17 days of videos. And it was a substantial amount of time. So thank you to everyone that helps sponsor the channel, that helps make all of this possible. I'm so appreciative. And thanks especially to Tavern Keeper and Dragon Girl this month for helping to keep the lights on at the Hoeg Law YouTube channel and to hopefully have interesting and fun conversations about all of this. Now, if you've been in Virtual Legality with us this month, you know we've covered a lot of stuff. As I just mentioned, we really covered Epic versus Apple. This series now in Antitrust Epic, which started only in August of last year, is now up to 50 videos. So if you just feel like sitting back, maybe you've gotten your second vaccine shot and you're just a little bit loopy and you just want to turn my voice on, I don't even know how many hours in a row this all is at this point, but you can just listen to an Antitrust Epic for a long time. But we also did other videos. We didn't just do Epic versus Apple. We talked about Twitch's policies and their hot tub streamers. We talked about Sony, which is actually a little bit related to Epic versus Apple, having to deal with potential crossplay fallout. The last video that we did was Randy Pitchford at Gearbox, essentially saying that some force, whether it's his publisher, whether it's his Sony, whether it's his both, have prevented him from including crossplay on Borderlands 3, specifically on the PlayStation platform, which a lot of folks, and I think rightly so, tied to this leak out of Epic versus Apple that suggested that Sony is the only party that is charging for a difference in playtime and revenue generated from your game, which isn't a huge amount of money in the grand scheme of things, but as we talked about in this most recent video, is random. And if you're a publisher, if you're anybody that's trying to set your budgets and understand what your liabilities and exposures are, then you don't love random. A lot of the time when I'm negotiating a contract, one of the main things that people ask me to do is to figure out how we can create certainty, how we can make sure that we don't have exposure that's unlimited in terms of liability, in terms of obligations, whatever it might be. And when you've got a contract term like this that says, well, if your data ever shows that people are playing on PlayStation significantly more than they're spending on PlayStation, then you owe us a cut of that. That's outside your control. That's random. You don't love that as a publisher, and it's possible, we don't know, it's all speculation, that Take-Two and 2K are saying, no, Randy, no Gearbox. We're not going to get involved with negotiating with Sony over crossplay because, quite frankly, regardless of whether Borderlands 3 has microtransactions and makes a lot of money in that fashion, we aren't going to risk our other franchises. And certainly Take-Two and 2K has a number of franchises that might have a lot more microtransaction money, might cost them a lot more were it to come down to it with negotiating against Sony. So we talk about a lot of fun stuff here. Certainly if you're here watching a live stream chat with me on a Saturday morning, you're probably familiar with all this. But this series is really about, if you've got any questions, if you want to talk about Epic versus Apple, if you want to comment on things that you think I did right or wrong in that series, or how I'm wrong about what I've said. I think I also highlighted as part of that series, we've been doing a weekly update with Games Industry Biz. James Batchelor asked me to participate in a panel group there where you can see me kind of talk a little bit about the substance of the trial on an overview basis. And you'll see a lot of what I've said here in my videos, but that can be a useful place to go check things out and check out how not every lawyer agrees with me. As the old saying goes, you put 3 lawyers in a room, you'll get 3 different opinions. And so you can check out what the other side of the fence looks like on people that think Epic has a stronger case than I do. Although, as we also pointed out as part of the series, folks still call me an Epic shill regardless, which all I want to say to that is, if you're on the internet and someone calls you a shill, I think you can disregard it, because if somebody can watch Epic versus Apple and come up with, I'm an Epic shill, then the term has no meaning whatsoever. So you should feel good about that. You can put it behind you. But that's basically it. That's what we talked about this month. So if chat wants to ask questions, the things I usually say is, if you want to highlight those, you can, of course, super chat. Always thankful for the support. You don't have to do that, really. You can also at me, at Hoeg Law, and that'll highlight and that'll pop up here. But in general, I'm not used to streaming with a chat on, so you got to get my attention a little bit. Repeats isn't a problem as well. So if you got any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with me talking a little bit about pop culture and about what I've played most recently. It is a Saturday morning, and I haven't gotten the chance to do post-mortem impressions yet of this, but right now, Returnal is sitting in the catbird seat as my current favorite game of the year as of May 29th, 2021. And if you've been following this game, if you've been following some of the, controversy about it, it doesn't allow you to save very easily. It has some bugs, potentially. It runs at a lower resolution than some of the Xbox fans would like to point out for PlayStation fans. But in terms of gameplay, Returnal is one of my most favorite games to actually interact with on a physical basis, to put your fingers on the controller, to move the joystick and hit the buttons in a long time. That it is just absolutely fun, and in a space that Housemarque, the developers of the game, haven't really worked in before. It is third person, it is over the shoulder, but it's very zippy. It very much encapsulates everything that they have done with their arcade games before, all in the midst of presenting as a roguelike, as presenting as these awesome environments that are fun and are really enjoyable to navigate. And so Returnal is one of my favorite games right now. And we have a question here. Did you hear about the Genshin Impact price increase last year due to Apple's policies? I'm kind of confused why that wasn't an argument on the Epic side. No, I didn't hear about, no. And I was going over the litigation. I was looking at the documentation that was presented by the two sides. And it certainly seems like if there was a piece of evidence that they could specifically tie to, oh, we're going to have to charge more in this venue, in iOS ecosystem, based around the fact that we owe 30% to Apple, that would have been something you would have hoped for Epic to bring up. That Epic would bring this up. I'm going to change this from the Returnal page because it's making me a little crazy. But that you would hope that Apple would bring that up or Epic would bring that up because it would be so useful for their case. But I hadn't heard about it, and I don't know what the evidence is for it exactly. You also have to look out if you're Epic. Part of what the judge was telling Epic, and what we had said as part of our series, was that there were steps that they took with both the Epic Game Store and how they did the Mega Drop last fall that made it look like they were essentially trying to, I don't know how you would frame it, pollute the evidence pool to suggest that, things would be cheaper if we were allowed to do this and do it themselves to make the case, even though, as the judge pointed out, they had never offered V-Bucks directly to consumers on their own website. The prices didn't change for the prices did change for the consoles, even though they're still taking their 30% pound of flesh. And so Epic looked like it was trying to put its thumb on the scale a little bit. So you have to make sure that when you're bringing up something like a Genshin Impact, which also has the Chinese connection, which Epic is somewhat trying to avoid, but also trying to place at the feet of Apple. You have a lot of strategic questions that you have to ask when you're going to raise something like that in a court of law. Hoeg Law, are you a baseball fan? Did you see that Javi Baez rundown on Thursday? Yeah, so, my family is from Chicago. And so my dad's a big Chicago Cubs fan, and he's got the MLB package, and he's watching a lot of the games now. But he hadn't seen this one. So in the afternoon, I think that was it Thursday? I saw that clip. I actually wound up tweeting it out, and I said, I think this is the worst defensive play I've ever seen. If you aren't familiar with the play, and if you aren't familiar with baseball, this isn't going to make a ton of sense. But first baseman gets the ball on a force out. All he has to do is put his foot on the base in order to end the inning. And essentially what happens is the runner starts running backwards to home where he has no safety and convinces the first baseman to follow him. He tries to throw it over him to the home plate. Home plate doesn't get the tag, and then the guy running to first, Javi Baez, gets back to first. All in a way of saying, there's probably a metaphor you can make about strategy in law and litigation or something like that. But by foregoing exactly what he could do and could have done at any point in the play, he was drawn into a really bad situation. So you always want to think out your angles. But it certainly was one of the worst defensive plays I've ever seen. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I like baseball. I'm unfortunately, I live in Southeast Michigan, so basically every one of our sports teams is bad at what they do. But I can live vicariously through folks like my father who love the Cubs, and they're still relishing their recent World Series win. Have you heard anything about Xbox's DRM issues? Thoughts? No. Leave a comment. What is going on with Xbox DRM? This relates to their PC interface or their Ultimate Game Pass or something else. Let me know. We could talk about it. Do you see any possible ruling in Epic versus Apple that might not be appealed by at least one party? Well, sure. If the judge just were to give one side or the other complete victory. If they just say, Epic, all of your arguments are bunk, get out of here. Apple, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to change anything. Epic's going to appeal that. Apple's not. And certainly vice versa. If Epic wins everything that it wants, breaks into the App Store, breaks into the in-app payment processing, gets rid of the anti-steering, and I think they asked for a couple of things under California law. If they got everything they asked for, then there would be no reason for them to appeal. In fact, the appeals court would laugh at them because there's nothing to change on their side. But in this particular case, it certainly sounds of a judge that might be trying to find something to give. I read it with my own biases, how I'm listening to the case, what I think the strengths of the case are. I hear the judge saying, I want to try to get Epic a little something. And certainly they've demonstrated that Apple is perhaps not the best arbiter of all of their rules. They aren't as clear as they possibly could be. It certainly looks like they're doing certain dicey things, even though those might not rise in their entirety to all of the terrible language Epic used in their motions. I still think Apple should not be allowed to do everything, says the judge, perhaps, and gives Epic. I think the most likely thing, as we've talked about in that series, is doing something to change those anti-steering rules to prohibit or to otherwise modify Apple's ability to prevent their developers from telling folks that they can get their in-app payment processing and purchases elsewhere. So I think that's probably the most likely thing to happen. What's my first gaming console? Mine was the Magnavox Odyssey 300. So my memories get a little bit foggy here, but it's either the Intellivision, which we really enjoyed, or the Atari 2600. Both of those were in my household at a very young age, and I would be lying if I could tell you exactly which one was first. I think I've probably told this story a little bit in this space, but my father was always a big technology guy, a big video game guy. That's really where I got my love of it. And so we were always out there getting the strange new video game system. So in my house, we had a CDI, we had a 3DO, we had basically everything but a Neo Geo and a Jaguar. I don't think we ever had those two consoles, but we had a Genesis and a 32X and a Sega CD. We had a TurboGrafx 16 and a TurboGrafx CD. And I remember sitting there with my father being wowed at the fact that I think it was East Books 1 and 2 had voice in the intro because they were using a CD. And that was just a really, really big moment for us. Do you have a feel for how much time it may take to get a real grasp on all the encumbrances that may be lurking in the MGM IP package? Depends on who you mean in terms of getting a real grasp. On me, on Virtual Legality, we're going to be left at the whim of what they want to reveal to us and when. In terms of them, the due diligence that would have related to all the licenses and all the distribution rights and all the contracts, that would have been done before they signed the definitive merger agreement. So they think, at least right now, that they have a good grasp on everything that's in that ecosystem. That would have taken a lot of time. That's why when we do our videos and we say, you sign a letter of intent, then you have a number of months while you draft the definitive documents. That's the merger agreement. Then you sign that merger agreement. That number of months is not just for the lawyers to spend your money and to bill your time. It is also for your diligence team to go in and say, show me all your contracts, show me what you've got. And certainly when something like MGM, you're talking about a centuries-old company that is well invested in a contract-based economy. You're talking about thousands, if not tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of documents that somebody somewhere has to go through and say, okay, this contract is between these two parties. It's dated here. Its termination is this. Can we assign it in a deal? What happens when there's a merger? What does this thing do? Do we need it to come over? Do we need to worry about it? Do we need to contact third parties? All in order to understand whether this thing comes over. That's why there's mergers and acquisitions teams are huge amounts of lawyers. You've got the folks that run the deal, which usually I am at this point in time, though I'm certainly not dealing with transactions the size of MGM here. But you got somebody that runs the deal. You've got associates, colleagues that go in and help the diligence process, go through the documents, make big charts about what the contracts are at the heart of all this thing. So they should, if they're doing their jobs right, and there's no reason to believe they're not, they should know what the lay of the land is when they sign that document. And that announcement that we got was them signing the document. Now we're left with, okay, we're going to have to contact people. We're going to have to get through that regulatory stuff, whatever the other closing conditions are, maybe move land, talk to landlords, whatever it might be. That's all supposed to be, as you saw described in those articles, routine. Hoeg Law, what is the one case you enjoy covering the most on here? Well, honestly, that's, the truth is it's Epic versus Apple. It is a little bit of a burnout from doing it for so long, for 3 straight weeks of really almost daily updates. But Epic versus Apple is by far the largest, most significant case that we have covered here, at least as it relates to video games. I think we've also covered Supreme Court cases, which are obviously of generalized importance. We covered the Bostock decision. We covered some other stuff. And if you watch my Supreme Court stuff, when I do it on occasion, you probably know how I feel about the Roberts Court. But outside of that, this is really one of the most important. And I think that in terms of drama, and I'm not a drama-based guy, but certainly for what this is, with Tim Sweeney being so out there, so public about what he feels his case is, it did present a very strong feeling for what the two parties of this litigation actually were. And certainly that was something that I tried to stamp down on in terms of my delivery of this, was not to just think of Epic and Tim as self-righteous, and really to analyze what was happening in the case on any given day, to talk about what the law is and what the judge is looking at. But Epic versus Apple was a very unique thing because Apple's such a big consumer brand, obviously a very, very valuable company. Epic is such a valuable company too, and has a very loud CEO that is fighting very hard for the developers, sure, but also to get a lower cut to reduce that 30% he has to pay to Apple. So all in all, I think it's my favorite case that I've covered here. We'll see what the original opinion says. We'll see what the appeal says. We'll be talking about Epic versus Apple, maybe for the entire lifetime of Virtual Legality. We will certainly see. What else we got going on? Hey, it's Lawful Masses. Hey, Richard, first time catching a live stream. Well, thank you, Leonard. It's nice to see you here. You can ask me questions, but if you ask me anything hard or specifically intellectual property related, I'm just going to refer people to your channel. So, watch it. Watch it. No legal questions here. Nothing about your trying to sneak in what to do if you're accidentally arrested on the side of the road. or what have you. But yes, can we have a face cam? Generally, no. Generally, my face cam splits now is I do face appearances and video appearances on other people's channels. We'll see. Question time is one of those where I've actually thought about potentially having a face cam up for this, because otherwise we're just kind of looking at slides and talking about what we've talked about. But I haven't gotten that worked out yet. So this might be the only channel or the only content on this channel that you see with a face presence, primarily because as I found doing it, and I don't have a fancy setup, I don't have depth of field, I don't have lighting rigs and that kind of thing, is that it was taking a little bit of extra time. And it was really cutting down, you'd be surprised, on my ability to get content out at the cadence that I want to get it out. If you've been watching Virtual Legality, you probably have noticed that I like to get things out fast and often and hopefully reflective of what's going on in the day. And it's also happening while I'm trying to run a law firm and run a legal practice and deal with my clients and handle their needs. There's an obligation. If you don't know, lawyers have an obligation to be zealous advocates, to put the proper amount of attention to whatever they're handling for their clients. So I got to do that at the same time. So the face cam and just, what I'm in and whether or not I want to show up in a sweatshirt or whatever I'm actually wearing while I'm doing law, that way, exactly, whether I want to be on a hot tub cam, exactly, is something that was distracting. And also the way I tend to analyze things. How do I put this? I'm often looking off to the side when I'm making my analysis or doing things that aren't specifically camera focused. So I think this is the best way, something like the voice, to get the best information out there, and so that you're paying attention to that and not being like, what the heck is Rick looking at? Also, to be totally candid, I do have my daughters around a lot, and they do try to make faces in my office door. And sometimes it's a little bit distracting, and I can cover that a little bit better with my voice rather than with my face. We do have a super chat. Thank you very much, Dineros, for the £5 super chat. Hi, Hoeg Law. Keep up the good work. Your commentary on Epic and Apple was very fair. No shillings. It's always funny, right? So in this space, we try to talk about video games and pop culture. And one of the reasons I designed Virtual Legality that way was I wanted to have important conversations about the nature of contract terms, and user license agreements, things that actually impact you in life. And you can apply to things like politics and important stuff out there in the world, but that don't have all of that extra weight with them, that don't have all of this extra stuff that kind of fits on top. So I'm totally okay being called a shill for Xbox or PlayStation or what have you. And certainly the way YouTube comments tend to work is if I make a PlayStation Pro video, then I'm going to be called a PlayStation shill, or I think a pony is usually what I see in the comments. And if I make something that's pro Xbox, I am called an Xbot or what have you. And that's okay. I think that doesn't kind of rise to the level of losing the conversation for people that are in this community, like it does when we get into a fight about politics or, international relations and things that can be a little bit more heated, that reasonable people can have very passionate, very truthful feelings on both sides, but doesn't lead to great conversation in forums like YouTube comments. So I built Virtual Legality to try to have important conversations about how the law interacts with your life and these kind of things you can see in newspaper articles that are important stuff. You can extend this to big tech, as we certainly have in this space, but that don't bear that kind of extra baggage. And so thank you very much for the super chat, Dineros. I don't consider myself a shill, but reasonable minds can differ, and people can call me a shill if they like. It's not going to hurt my feelings. But I'm not taking money from anybody. I would certainly let you know if I did. I know the FTC regulations pretty well. I have a number of videos on them. If people want to discount what I have to say because of the stance in which I say it, that's okay. That's what you're supposed to do with critical thought, is analyze the speaker. It's one of the reasons we say so often that anonymous sources bother us at the top of articles, because you can't figure out where they're coming from. Okay, next, at Hoeg Law. Sounds like you may want to sign up for Harvard's Copy X course. It was a blast. I'm not a lawyer, but I look it for fun and met some cool lawyers from all over the world. I'll look into it. I don't know what that is actually, but I'll happily check it out. At Hoeg Law, do you have any gut feelings on the long-term impact Game Pass has on the business of game development? No. Does anybody have any feelings on the long-term impact? I have the same concerns that I think a lot of people do, which is I think Microsoft's going to succeed at this initiative. I think that's a great thing for games overall. Like, as a giant ecosystem, revenue into game companies, I think that's going to increase. I think Game Pass is a good thing there. As someone that's been gaming for their entire lives, that loves role-playing games, that loves single-player content, that loves storytelling, and wants to continue kind of diving into what storytelling can achieve in video games with things like Returnal, with other things that try new stuff, I do get worried when we talk about something like Game Pass that what you're going to do is potentially incentivize a specific type of game that kind of races to the bottom with what it's going to get in terms of money as a sale of the actual application and sells microtransactions. The focus is on engagement. That Game Pass could have a transformative effect on the industry that makes it look a little bit more like mobile. And I am not disparaging people that love mobile, that love gacha, that love that interaction. I have loved it myself in certain circumstances, but I do think there's a risk that a Game Pass, subscription services in general, and if you saw some of the documentation that Sony's put out, they're going to look at that a little bit more closely. That might be a video next week from me, actually, is that you might start to see a sea change for how the actual industry functions. And the concern from my perspective, the concern from my perspective would be that we will potentially lose out on the things that I like to play the most. And that's just selfish. And I'm a guy that understands market economics. And I say, okay, if the market wants to go in a different direction, that's what you got to do, companies. I understand that. But as somebody that loves what he loves, and here's a distracting daughter right now, I want to see the games that I love continue to succeed and have a place in the environment. So my concern would be that that's not going to happen, but we don't have evidence of that just yet. So I'm an optimist by nature. So let's hope it doesn't. Let's hope that Game Pass is just an overall boon to everything, and we all continue to get exactly what we love about this wonderful hobby of ours. Hoeg Law, thoughts on the current trend to remake/remaster old games rather than make new ones? This is bait. This is designed to get me to talk 40 minutes about how I don't like the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? No, I'm just joking. I think that it is a good thing. I think that there is a lot of stuff. Honestly, if I were a multi-millionaire, one of the things I might try to do is what you've seen with some of these models, which is to go buy up intellectual property that has gone by the wayside that was really, really valuable and really useful at some point, and make remasters of games that have been lost, not because they weren't great, not because they didn't have great stories or great mechanics or great fun to be had, but because of the technology at issue, right? When we're talking about these kinds of things, the technology at issue comes first. And a lot of folks, much like trying to get them to watch a black and white movie or what have you, will just look at something that looks like it probably started with a DOS prompt and not play it. So you've got just gems out there. You've got Starflight. You've got this Star Control 2, which is, of course, my favorite game of all time. I know people balk when I give that as my answer, but it is. It's been my number one game of all time forever. If you haven't played it, you can play it on Steam. You can play it in a free version that you can find online that's been released legally by the owners of the code that run that. I think it's called the Urquan Masters. Check it out. Star Control 2, my favorite game of all time. But you could update these things. And you've seen attempts at that. You saw Stardock, a company really close to me, about 4 minutes away from my house, buy up the Star Control trademark and make a new Star Control game, which I really, really liked. I think it was my second best game of, I want to say 2018. And I would love to see those intellectual properties bought up and remastered. What I don't like as much is things like the news items that come out and say, okay, The Last of Us is going to be remastered. The Last of Us is all of 8 years old. It had a remaster already. You know, I would rather see things plucked from the abyss and made new. Things that I really liked. I don't know how much of a market there is out there for it. And certainly what you're seeing now with consolidation and the way that these companies are running is a certain amount of risk aversion that I would like to see go away. I think that the big publishers could take bigger risks than what they're taking right now. And I would certainly like to see some active CEOs and C-level executives get in there and say there are markets to be mined here without just selling the 15th over-the-shoulder cinematic adventure or the 25th open world Ubisoft collectathon. I think that at the end of the day, I like it, but there are ways to do it properly and there are ways to do it wrong. Oh, we got another super chat. Heckin' good. Thank you for your $2 super chat. Release the Mass Effect 2 autopsy. Now, we call them post-mortems here. They're not autopsies. I think YouTube might actually yell at me for saying autopsy. Now, I don't know what YouTube's doing anyway. We lost 2 days of analytics and 2 days of subscribers. Who knows what's happening at YouTube? This might be the end, but I think it's actually happening to everybody. I could potentially do a Mass Effect post-mortem. I think from my perspective, you heard a lot of what I had to say in the Iron Lords podcast debate. Please do check that out. Had a wonderful conversation with a number of people from all walks of the video game industry and the commentary industry on the Iron Lords podcast. I think it went 2.5 hours long. I was on Team Mass Effect 1. And that's primarily because I love what I've already mentioned: role-playing, world building, storytelling, more than just RPG mechanics. One of the other things I wanted to talk about was that I'm playing Biomutant, right? And if you haven't been following this, Biomutant got some pretty terrible reviews. It also got some really good reviews. And I love nothing if I don't love divisiveness in reviews. I love to figure out and try to dive into what's happening there in reviewers' minds. And one of the reasons I've been enjoying Biomutant more than other people have, I think, is because the actual world is interesting. They're trying to do interesting things. They're clearly, I would say, too ambitious. Their reach exceeds their grasp. But the fact that the systems fail in certain important ways, the fact that the fighting fails in certain important ways, is much closer to a Mass Effect 1 than, a Mass Effect 2. So this really bothers people that are there to play the game. Gameplay is king. It doesn't bother me because I'm there to see worlds. My favorite motto for any of these game companies was always Origins, that said, we create worlds. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And that was what is possible in video games when you can swing your camera around, when you can tell your character which way to go and whatnot. And Biomutant's trying to do something weird. I cannot tell you it's perfect. I can't even tell you it's anywhere close. But in terms of supporting smallish developers doing weird things and building a world that's worth checking out, I have enjoyed my time with Biomutant, while at the same time acknowledging that in some of my favorite reviews, like Tom Chick, if you don't know Tom Chick, he has a long life as a video game reviewer. He's one of my favorite reviewers on earth. He's got a website called Quarter to Three. You can check out his Biomutant review. He gives it a 1 star out of 5. It goes on Metacritic as a 20% or a 2. And I read that review, and I don't weight what he said about Biomutant the same way he does, but he is the best reviewer on the planet Earth, in my opinion, because you know exactly where he's coming from. You know how he gets there with the broken systems, and it's very useful to kind of analyze your own thoughts about a video game based around reviews like that. If you don't know him, check it out, Quarter to Three. And he gave Biomutant a 1 out of 5. I would never give it a 1 out of 5. It's worth a lot more to me, but I know exactly where he's coming from, and that's what I love about this stuff, is having those conversations that are useful, that are fruitful. Don Lionheart, $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Thank you for correcting your Roblox pronunciation. Very much worth the $5. I was tempted to say it wrong right there. No, and look, this is the nature of reading things, right? I never played Roblox, and actually I did see in the logo after I started talking about it in Epic versus Apple, which I wasn't prepared for, obviously, when it first popped up, that they actually do put a long O sign in their logo to try to help people. So I said, okay, well, you've done your job. That's on me from now on. So I did change it. I am more than happy to try to pronounce things correctly. Obviously, Epic versus Apple was amazing for me because it just had a whole number of names, a whole number of conversations. And every time I would get there, I'd be like, we're going to give it a try. Let's see if we can say Shyamalenzi. We'll give it a go. And certainly that was a lot of fun. I'm more than happy to try to pronounce things correctly. I cannot promise you that a number of Palpatines won't come out as we're talking about Star Wars again. That's just the way I learned it, folks. Okay, we have another super chat from ThunderGod97. $20. Thank you so much. Not a lawyer, but I've been interested in law since I sat in on my uncle's trials as a magistrate judge. Your uncle was the magistrate judge, not you, right? Because you're not a lawyer. Anyway, later circuit court, now retired. I really appreciate your mix of the law and gaming. Thanks, and keep up the great work. That is so nice of you to say. Yeah, I think it would be awesome if people in high school or otherwise got to sit in on a court case or more than one, honestly. One, because you get to see how much procedure is a part of all this, that the design of our judicial system is not to just yell hearsay because it's fun, or to yell objection and point your finger like Phoenix Wright and then tap paper explaining things, as much as I love it, but that all of those procedures are designed to get at truth, to get at a place where evidence that could sound like it's useful isn't so far removed from what is actually the truth that it prejudices even a judge, or especially a jury that doesn't have that legal background. A lot of the things that we rely on are people that don't have a legal background to understand these things, the lawyers to explain them, the judge to explain them with jury instructions. And there's so much to be gained from going in and sitting there and seeing how much procedure is involved. And also, and this is going to sound ironic, to see how boring it is. to see how not dramatic it is. One of the things I couldn't quite capture in Epic versus Apple, because I think a number of commenters said I was treating it like a wrestling match or a sporting event, was that if you were to actually listen to that 7 or 8 hours of testimony, as Ms. Robertson did at The Verge for us, you would see how much of it is boring. If you were to look at those tweets, you'd see that there was a space of a half hour, and there might be a tweet in there that says, we're just continuing to talk about how Fortnite works as a game. And we can skip that because we have a certain understanding and it's not useful to a recap type show like we do. But so much of that is trying to get the fact situation correct so that your record shows exactly how you want the judge to rule, how the judge ruled, and then you can appeal it, and the appeals court can go and say, this is the facts that the judge found, this is how she found them, and in an ideal world, you've got an exact, perfect record of how all of this logic was realized, because this is important stuff, right? You might have a judge in California telling a multinational billion, trillion-dollar company that they can't do something that is going to fundamentally change not just how they make money, how investors' money is treated. Their stock could go down immediately. If they lost everything, you'd have a stock impact that was significant. A number of people's money would be materially affected by a single person making a decision in California. So we want the law to be cautious and circumspect and careful with these kinds of things. And I think it's great that you got a chance to actually go and check out a legal system like that because it is procedural, it is boring, and it is also super, super important. What else we got here? Loved Mass Effect 1. Was my favorite because of the world building. Give me the First Contact where you wanted to do a prequel. Who knows what they're going to do with Mass Effect 4? I got to be honest. I'm always rooting for games to succeed. I'm always an optimist in these kinds of things. I don't have a ton of faith in current day BioWare. I can't wait for them to prove me wrong. But certainly their most recent releases I haven't loved as much as some. I really didn't even love Dragon Age Inquisition when Dragon Age Origins was one of my favorites. And certainly Anthem, it goes without saying, was not the smoothest release. We've also got a Team Mass Effect 3 because I'm always a gameplay guy. Totally understand that argument. That's not me, but differences make the world go round. That's what makes the conversation fun. That's, as I say, it would be very boring, if not irritating, to have people all around you that just thought exactly the same as you. There's an awesome Twilight Zone about that. That's the key. Find reviewers you understand and interpret their findings into your reviews. Yeah, Tom Chick is exactly that guy for me. I think he's one of the best writers in gaming. Please do check him out. I'm really upset that I got my jury summons on a case and the trial was canceled due to COVID. Oh, you wanted to be on a jury? Well, so I got to tell you, so as a lawyer, you probably heard this. I've been summoned a couple of times. I've been in voir dire only once, and the lawyerness did get me kicked out. They don't really want juries finding law. That's for the judge. And so if you are a lawyer, oftentimes that can get you kicked out of the jury process. But fun story. During one of those summonses, while I was waiting to be called in to voir dire, I did do all the writing on an iOS phone app that my brother and I were making a game back in, I don't know what that would have been, 2011, 2012. And so the jury process was pretty useful for me in terms of getting all the writing I needed to get done for that game. Let's see what else we've got here. Blasphemy, Dragon Age Inquisition is wonderful. Good use of blasphemy, given the Inquisition theme there. Dragon Age is a top 5 series for me. So I adore Dragon Age Origins. I think it might be my favorite BioWare game, top to bottom. Dragon Age Inquisition was fine. It just doesn't rise to the level of Dragon Age Origins, and Dragon Age 2 I'd prefer not to talk about. Do you still have beef with the Dragon Quest 12 logo and info? Do I have beef? No, I don't have beef. I'm always hoping for games to succeed. I'm always hoping to find the next big surprise that I'm not expecting. Like Dead by Daylight here now on your screen. But I grow concerned that a series that has become popular, that people look forward to for a specific recipe, for a specific reason that people like it, want to branch out. And to some extent I'm empathetic, even sympathetic, whatever you want to call it, that creators want to do new things and they don't want to just get stuck making the cute Dragon Quest forever. But I often think that that's useful for a different franchise or for an offshoot, right? Like Final Fantasy, I've loved my whole life. I don't really love that they have turned it into an action RPG franchise. I would rather see that kind of offshoot. Now, Final Fantasy is kind of different because it's always done weird stuff with its games. But my favorites, your 4, 6, 7, 8, probably, in Final Fantasy are turn-based, active time battle, whatever they want to call them. But they go out there and they give you more strategy than I think is often the case in action games. Now, I thought they found a good middle ground with Final Fantasy VII Remake, but when Dragon Quest XII comes out and it's all, we're going to be dark and broody and edgy and adult and all this stuff, it's like, that's not really why I come to Dragon Quest. There's a lot of dark and broody and edgy and adult video games. You can get that in a lot of places. You probably have heard me complain in this space a little bit before about Uncharted 4, which took a fairly lighthearted Indiana Jones series and decided we're going to dive deep into the depths of the soul of Nathan Drake and make up a sibling that we've never heard of before. And we're going to slow down the intro music so it's soulful and mournful, and this is a serious story. And I don't want that. There are places for that. Last of Us was one of those places. Even though I don't like the story of Last of Us Part 2, Last of Us was one of those places where you can do that. You can have that kind of, we're going to be sad and depressing, and we're going to dive into that and talk about it. I think a lot of the times you get this long-running franchise to say, okay, we're going to do something that's different. And I want Dragon Quest XII to be awesome. I love the Dragon Quest series. I will undoubtedly play it. I have no doubts it will be good. Will it be the kind of game that I want? I don't know. I'm always an optimist. We'll see. Another super chat. While you guys are killing it today, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Cade Forever, $9.99. Hey, Hoeg. Was wondering if you could give insight into Japanese developer acquisition from American companies, specifically Microsoft. Sure. One of the things that happens here, and we have to avoid legal advice, and so the recommendation would always be, hey, are you a multinational company seeking to buy a Japanese company? You should talk to counsel about what that specifically looks like. As you well know, but I suspect you're not. Then when we talk about restrictions on other jurisdictions, if you want to buy a Japanese company, you've got certain rules you have to follow. If you want to buy a South American company, in certain of those countries, you have rules you have to follow. And that might mean that you have to have an ownership group that has somebody in that country that is represented. It might mean something else. They have different rules in different European Union countries, whether it's France or Spain. What I would say is, and not to be too glib about this, there's always a way to structure your transaction to make it happen. There's always a workaround is probably too strong of a word, but there's a way to make your structure of entities match what is required by the jurisdictional authorities. So in Japan, you're going to have certain rules about what the board looks like, what the holding companies look like, what kind of touch point you have with Japanese citizen in order to make that acquisition work. And you can do that. You can do that with a holding company. You can do that with subsidiaries, spinoffs. It should come as no surprise that when Microsoft bought Bethesda and they had Tango already in there, that they had the right structure set up. That's what you pay the lawyers for, to make that allowed under that specific law. When you buy the whole enterprise, you're buying the whole structure as it stands. And Microsoft knows what it's doing in terms of running global operations. So when you see these articles, when you see these notions of, oh, you can't buy a Japanese company if you don't have a Japanese citizen, whatever the rules might be, and I don't know them sitting here talking to you in this video format, but there's undoubtedly a rule or two. There's rules in almost every country about foreign investment and things like that. Oh, they can't buy them. It looks like that on its face. You're assuming the status quo, that if just big old American behemoth Microsoft tried to gobble up a company, it couldn't do that. That might be right in the black letter truest sense of what you're looking at, but Microsoft can spin off a subsidiary and merge it into the Japanese entity and have a board member from Japan, whatever it might take to comply with those rules. Yes, it takes more hoops to jump through. Yes, it takes more resources to get done, but virtually anything you want to do in one of these locations, you can. Sometimes it requires federal ruling, whether that's Japanese or French or Brazilian or whatever it might be. But it's all a process, and generally you can make it happen unless you're really talking about skittish companies and skittish governments, right? There are certain technology companies where the U.S. is going to have a problem when we talk about, energy security infrastructure. When we talk about things that we're really worried about in terms of getting hacked or otherwise harmed. There are lists of specific industries where Japan is more concerned. If you're going to get into like our nuclear software, we got to have a closer look at whether or not we're going to allow foreign purchases and things like that. Video games are not that. They are technology. Some of the lists can look like they might apply to video games. In general, they don't. At Hoeg Law, all jokes aside, I am very glad you have chosen to do what you are doing in virtual legality. The subject matter you tackle is of great interest to me, and you do it well. Rock on. Well, thank you. I very much appreciate it. I'm having a lot of fun here. And certainly, I think a lot of folks that are enjoying this content are having a lot of fun. And I really appreciate everybody that comes out to these streams, that supports the channel It's been great, really, since YouTube has gotten a little wonky. Since that first fake strike that I got replaced, that I got fixed. Certainly the growth has been down. Some of the things that are happening behind the scenes, I think there is a list that says I was struck at some point. And so I very much appreciate everybody that is involved in helping get this stuff out there and hopefully having fun doing it. Before we get to this super chat, I am really, really thankful. I did want to say Dead by Daylight. I had a couple games I want to talk about. Biomutant, Returnal, and Dead by Daylight. If you don't play this game, this is my favorite multiplayer game ever. It's essentially really fancy hide and go seek. One of the things I want to point out is they're having a Resident Evil event in a couple of weeks. You get to be the Nemesis, Leon, Jill. I love this game. I've got it on PlayStation. If at some point, we can get together, maybe even stream Dead by Daylight, this is something I'm going to be looking at because I love this game so much. You should check it out. Even if you don't like horror, it's got some stuff that you probably won't like in terms of how it looks, but it is absolutely fantastic. It's asymmetrical, so you've got survivors on one side and a big bad killer on the other, and it's just a fantastic game to play. Real Radic with another super chat. I am so thankful to all of you guys with a Canadian $5. Speaking on acquisitions, do you think Xbox will buy Sega or any big Japanese publisher like Koei Tecmo, Square Enix, etc.? I never say never on what Microsoft or Xbox might do right now. Clearly the wallet is open for them to try to really take a commanding spot in content delivery. I think their history has suggested that they have tried to break into Japan. They've tried to do it with exclusives. They've tried to do it with relationships with folks like Square Enix, and it hasn't proven successful in the past. So in general, I would say I would always lean away from them trying to do that again because they've been burned on it before. But you're looking at a situation where some of those companies might be available for reasonable sums. Honestly, if you go back and you look even a couple of years ago at Capcom, you probably could have bought them for a lot less than you can now. They're on a bit of a hitting streak. But I'm not sure they're going to invest in those things. And again, the important thing to remember is for most of these companies, it takes two to tango. That you're going to have to convince the board of directors. You're going to potentially have to convince founders in certain respects, depending on the kind of company that you're trying to buy. And sometimes, even though it might make all the sense in the world for Microsoft's side of things, it doesn't make sense for the acquisition side of things, or they just don't want to do it. One of the things I bring up a lot is Insomniac was making PlayStation games primarily for their entire history. And you would be forgiven for thinking that they were a Sony first-party team for a long, long time, but they weren't, because their founders, their CEO, wanted to be independent, didn't necessarily want to use that independence to make things for Xbox, except for a few exceptions like Sunset Overdrive and Fuse, but wanted to have that independence because they wanted to be independent. And then when that dropped, when they didn't want to do that anymore, Sony bought them, gobbled them right up. And now you've got, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart coming out next month, and it's looking awesome. And that's great, but you always have to remember that it's not just fantasy football. It's not just us putting companies together. It's actual people with actual interests and investors and stakes and boards of directors that have to decide it makes sense for them. That's one of the reasons why Bethesda was a surprise when it happened the way it did, is because we had no inkling that Bethesda was really shopping around. Alan Vorlite, $5 super chat. I simp for Daddy Hoeg. I don't know quite what that means, but I appreciate it, I think. Peace sign, alien head. So thank you so much for the super chat. Did you see the Horizon State of Play? Thoughts? Okay, so this is where I get in trouble, right? This is where people call me a contrarian. I like Horizon Zero Dawn. I don't love Horizon Zero Dawn. And I thought the State of Play was nice. But it looked like what I would assume a Horizon sequel would look like, and I will undoubtedly play it, and I will enjoy it. It didn't excite me in any specific way. So I think it'll be a fun game. I like to see tropical locales as much as the next guy, but I'll wait and see. Because again, from my perspective, I think you guys got a pretty good feel for my tilt on these things. I love world building. I love story. I love lore. Horizon was both simultaneously overlord and under. Like, it had a lot of conversations, a number of which were world building and were fun, and a number of which were boring and uninteresting to me. So it's a really interesting property. That being said, I always love the number 2 in a series because I think you have a lot of great course corrections. If you got a good company putting together a good product, I think Guerrilla Games is that. And I think you can have a second game leap. I think of Assassin's Creed to Assassin's Creed 2. Assassin's Creed 2, absolutely fantastic game. Assassin's Creed 1, I wouldn't describe it as an absolutely fantastic game. So I'm hopeful that Horizon makes that big leap. And we'll see when it comes out. Them not putting a release date number on it suggests to me that 2021 might be out of bounds. We'll see what they're going to hit. Another super chat, DJ Farlow, $5. Hi, Hoeg. Are those group legal plans offered through an employer worthwhile? Thanks for all the informative and entertaining videos you've made. So they can be. It depends on what's being offered, what kind of coverage you're getting, what they're providing for you in terms of representation, like so many things. And I apologize for this being the lawyer's answer to these kinds of questions. But it really, really depends on your situation, what it's going to cost you, and what you think is your likelihood of getting a liability issue. Certainly if you're a director or an officer, directors and officers, insurance and participation in legal coverage can make sense. You get down the line, it probably makes a little less sense, but it's really going to be up to your personal situation. I'm sorry I can't give a better answer than that. But I think it's certainly interesting to look at. There are times when it can make sense, definitely. Who's your favorite fictional lawyer? That's a good question. Matlock, probably. My favorite of the kind of old school shows like that is Columbo. He's not a lawyer. But yeah, maybe Matlock. I would have to think about that. That's a good question. I love the Phoenix Wright video game series. I don't like Phoenix Wright as a character as much, primarily because he's set to be a player stand-in. So he has a lot of like self-doubt and things that I prefer to see kind of run through from my fictional lawyers. So I think probably Matlock is the answer. So I'll age myself that way. Hi, Rick. What's your opinion on Star Citizen as a lawyer and a gamer? I like people dreaming. I like people dreaming big. I like people wanting to see greatness and ambition and really have that grasp, try to make big things. I think it's been pretty self-evident for a long time now that Star Citizen isn't going to be what folks hoped it would be. And I certainly, as a lawyer and gamer, look at it and say, I think it's probably a pretty bad investment in terms of getting to that place that was originally proposed. If you already like what they've got, if you just want to help support that kind of dreaming aspect, I get that. Certainly, Roberts has presented games that I've really loved. Wing Commander 3 and Wing Commander 4 are some of my earliest kind of cinematic gaming experiences. Absolutely loved that. And so I would love to see it succeed. But even as an optimistic as I am, I don't see it coming out in the fashion that it was originally portrayed as coming out. Kojak's a good answer. We have another super chat. Mike B, $2. What's your favorite snack or sweet treat? Those are probably different. My favorite sweet treat is probably like a Sour Patch Kids. I'm actually like a fruity candy guy here. Starburst, Skittles, Sour Patch Kids. Since the pandemic started, we've actually been building up our basement environment to be a little bit more like a movie theater. So one of the things my parents actually got me for Christmas was a fancy popcorn machine with the full kettle fryer and the whole popcorn setup. So I've been perfecting my movie theater popcorn. So that's almost certainly my favorite snack at this point in time, and working on getting it up to, I think what I've described it as 95% movie theater popcorn fidelity. Which is one of my favorite things. And so we now can watch movies. I can pop popcorn. We've got a icy machine. We've built a little movie theater down in the basement level of Hoeg House. And so I really, really do love that. Thank you for the question. Another super chat. Static Albatross, $10. The one thing that has never made sense to me about Epic versus Apple. If Epic wasn't a good plaintiff, why didn't they find a better one? Like Peter Thiel did with Hulk Hogan and Gawker. I think this comes back to the righteousness. And this isn't intended to be disparaging. Epic, and especially Tim Sweeney, felt that this was his fight to have, that he wanted to have this fight, that Apple had been getting under his skin, and he wanted to be the leader of this thing. And so when you get into that situation, it's not about who the best plaintiff is. If you're the CEO of Epic, Epic is the company you've got. And you can't force Microsoft to sue Apple. Microsoft seems disinclined to sue Apple. They'll just work back channels and otherwise bludgeon them with their large size. And that's how it normally works. You can't convince NVIDIA to sue Apple. You've got control of your own company. And so you potentially do that. You also clearly have notions of grandeur on your own side. You don't call your project Project Liberty. You don't write a federal lawsuit before the actual event happens that gives rise to it, unless it's all your plan. And that's not a problem. But it means that Tim Sweeney and Epic wanted to be the heroes of this story. And that was what they chose to frame themselves as. And you can kind of understand it from that perspective. While as a lawyer, I look at it and say, well, doing all this way, having Tim out there in public, having a free Fortnite campaign, positioning yourself as the hero of the masses when we can all see from the legal side that this is going to make you $1 billion if you win it, creates a certain negative energy. But I will also say, as I've said in a number of the videos in Epic versus Apple, that makes us look a little bit more negatively at him and Epic. That makes the judge look a little bit more negatively at him and Epic. But any decent judge, there's no indication that this isn't a decent judge. She has some really insightful questions, and I'll be very interested in her opinion on this, that any decent judge is going to separate out those kind of personal feelings and, oh, you shouldn't have done that, you didn't need to be in breach, from what is the legal question here. The legal question is Apple a monopolist? Is their use of these contract terms an illegal use of monopoly power? And if it doesn't rise to that level, is it instead an illegal, unreasonable restraint to trade on what actually happens in their market? And the judge is looking at those questions. Well, yes, also saying, oh, well, Tim and Epic and might have these thoughts. She also has plenty of thoughts on Apple and didn't believe half the answers that Tim Cook gave, and rightly so. A lot of those answers sounded of bunk, but the kind of bunk that you would hear from a chief executive officer. Okay, 5 minutes. 5-minute warning for this episode of Question Time. So if you've got any more questions, please do get them in. I will try to answer them as quickly as possible here at the end. Again, super thankful for everybody that has participated already, and certainly for everybody that has helped do the super chats and support the channel even more. I'm blown away and I continue to be blown away by your generosity and hopefully love of what we're doing here, and I really do appreciate it. Hoeg Law, any more legal agreement breakdown series coming from you like the publisher agreement videos? I have to finish that one. Epic versus Apple got in the way a little bit. I still owe 2 more videos on that series. Let me know. The game publishing agreement was one of the ones that really jumped out at me. I thought it was important work that could be evergreen, that could sit on the site. And certainly people keep finding it. I think it's been shared around, I think maybe even in some classrooms. And I love to see that. So I got to finish that. I got to do episode 9. I got to do episode 10 of that. And then, I would be looking for a long form something to do in the second half of 2021. So if you got any ideas, leave a comment, DM me on Twitter, send me an email, rhoeg@hoeglaw.com. I would love thoughts on that, perhaps doing some kind of baseline EULA maybe even, or terms of service or something like that. But I want it to be generally applicable to folks and to have fun having that conversation. At Hoeg Law, Stargate SG-1, Babylon 5, or Space Above and Beyond. Out of those, Bab 5, easy. I'm a world building and politics guy. I absolutely love what happens with Babylon 5. This is one of those where it's like, oh, that would be great to remaster. Babylon 5 is awfully difficult for modern viewers to kind of jump into because it's all old CGI and computer graphics. And my wife can't stand the hair of the Centauri. But I absolutely love Babylon 5. I will tell you this right now, and nobody spoil me, I swear to God, in my chat. I am currently in season 4 of The Expanse. And it's possible I couldn't love that series more. Right now, depending on how it ends, how it goes, where it goes, it's right now going to be potentially one of my top TV shows of all time, and certainly belongs on that list right now. So I'm really enjoying that. If you like space, if you like science fiction, hard science fiction, weird science fiction, do check out The Expanse. If you got Amazon Prime, I think you can watch all the seasons on it right now. Absolutely love it. Got another super chat, Casual Nerd Jason, $4.99. Thank you for your work. Have a great holiday weekend. Thank you. Yeah, we'll see how much work we do on Memorial Day. You are your own boss. Doesn't work quite as well as some people think it does, I think. So we'll see what I'm doing on Monday. But I very much appreciate it. You have a great holiday weekend as well. DJ Farlow, $5 super chat. When the Epic versus Apple case is finally decided in about 10 years, what impact do you think it may have on contracts given what kicked off the case? Well, I think Epic versus Apple is a great example of what contracts can't do, right? You've got a contract from Apple that says you are absolutely prohibited from doing this, but it's words on a page. And those words on a page say you can't do this. Epic does it anyway. Apple says, okay, our words on a page say we can cancel you. We cancel Epic and Fortnite. And then they say, all right, we're suing you for the validity of your contract. So in terms of writing contracts, it doesn't change anything. The same kind of advice is you can never just rely on the words on a page. You have to have relationships with people. It's one of the things that I think Epic really burned as a bridge is there is a certain trust element to signing a contract that Epic is going to have issues with in the immediate term. However, they have one of the most valuable resources in gaming. And so, regardless of how the case finishes, I do think Fortnite will find its way back on iOS. The only question is what the terms of that coming back actually look like. In terms of the rest, really depends on what the judge says, what the Court of Appeal says. If anti-steering rules are prohibited, they might come out. If the entire walled garden ecosystem is prohibited by law, as you've heard me say in the series, a lot of folks have a lot of problems. So we'll go to that bridge when we come to it. I don't think the judge is going to rule that Apple is a monopolist by virtue of controlling access to their own hardware. But if she does, then, as I've said before, all hell breaks loose across a whole number of industries. So we'll see what happens there. Last couple of questions or comments. Just wanted to say I was really impressed with the speed that you posted updates for Apple versus Epic. Thank you. I was really focused on trying to keep up with what was happening on the day-to-day basis. Definitely an entertaining series. Can't wait to watch your breakdown of the verdict. Yeah, that'll be a long one. In all likelihood, that'll be a long video. We've seen what this judge writes for motion, so it's probably going to be 80, 85 pages of an opinion. But we'll see. We'll see what she writes, and we'll see how long it is. Yes, The Expanse is amongst the best with Bab 5 and Battlestar Galactica. Pink Husky, I like the cut of your jib. Expanse, Bab 5, and Battlestar Galactica. Those are probably my three favorites. And Expanse, I haven't gotten to the end yet, and they haven't made the end yet. I think season 6 is going to be the end. But I've just been absolutely thrilled with the scope of The Expanse and how much it's willing to change I think it goes through the book series and gets to sequels and things like that. But absolutely love that series. Highly recommend it. They did clean up B5 pretty well for HBO Max. See, I watched those. I couldn't tell the difference. This might be when you're playing a remaster of a video game and it just looks like you remembered it looking. So it still looks old. I have no doubt that they cleaned up a few things. I love Bab 5. You don't have to convince me. But in terms of bringing people in, recommending The Expanse is much easier than recommending Bab 5 because The Expanse is really clean and shiny and fantastic. B5 is on HBO Max. Okay. So that is question time for May. Check out Dead by Daylight. Biomutant's interesting. I love Returnal to Death. We'll probably talk about it more on this channel. And again, if you are interested in supporting the channel in other ways, this is the Patreon episode, really, that's supported by some of our senior associate tier patrons. And thank you so much for them and for everybody else that is in the Patreon. As I said, we've crossed 50 patrons, which I can hardly believe. And I thank everybody so much for it. And certainly have a great Memorial Day weekend if you're in the United States, or otherwise have a great weekend. And as I say, I will catch you on the very next episode of Virtual Legality. Thanks, everybody, and have a good one.